Okay, so during your recent the Schneider Electric virtual event, which I think had the title "Preparing IT Infrastructure for Net Zero," in your presentation, I think you started by giving a bit of a background to DCIM, the history of that, and that, bearing in mind what we will be talking about, might be good if you could give us just a bit of a refresh as to sort of where DCIM came from and where it's got to up until what we will then talk about.
Well, yeah, Phil, I mean, we kind of give a perspective on DCIM that I think is new in the industry, is that I actually think you can take the first rudimentary versions of DCIM actually started arriving in the 80s or 90s when PCs first started being used as servers. And, you know, at the time we were making UPSs that started supporting those servers. And then subsequently customers wanted software to go with them. So it was very rudimentary stuff. And, you know, if the power went out, we let the server know and the server could shut down. We started developing some more sophisticated, because customers want to be able to manage them remotely. So we had rudimentary tools and being able to monitor the infrastructure. And we didn't call it that at the time, but it was in effect, you know, a DCIM 1.0, because it was monitoring physical infrastructure. Then I would argue that coincidentally with the .com bust, CIOs, all those PC servers, the CIOs wanted to get control over them, and they started moving them into the data center. And when that happened, the requirements on software went up. And in fact, it was during this period of time that the term data center infrastructure management first started hitting the market, right? And but it was really geared towards solving problems associated with, all right, how much space do I have in the data center? Do I have the power capacity? Do I have cooling capacity? PUE started getting developed in 2007, 2008 as a metric that the industry wanted to standardize on, and DCIM was a tool to help manage that. But it was really oriented around being a tool that was specifically built to help answer those types of questions. So it went from being DCIM 1.0, which was the first version of monitoring management, that continued to get more sophisticated under DCIM 2.0, but DCIM 2.0 adding in this planning and modeling capability. And that's really when the term first was used. And what we believe is happening now, and I would argue that the pandemic is kind of another, inflection point for the industry. A couple of things came from the pandemic. Is we all of a sudden realized very quickly that it no longer was about just the data center, but it was about all the connection points in between the end user, right, and the infrastructure that they've got. The sprawling infrastructure became critical. To give you an example, recently I was working out of my house. My utility line got cut to my house, and so I was dependent on my APC infrastructure to keep me up and running. And if that didn't happen, some very critical business things wouldn't have occurred, right? Yes, maybe I back up to 5G and what have you, but the redundancy and resiliency was as important for me in my wiring closet at home as it was what I was connecting to in the data center. So we think, you know, that's kind of starting what I would argue is going to be, if history is any guide, another 20-year trend on development of this software. But the key difference is a couple of things. Is it's not only about monitoring management and planning and modeling. What we've also developed in order to respond and help our customers through these challenges is the ability to develop a very custom solution for customers. So not everybody needs all the capabilities. Some people want just very high level dashboards. We know they need to integrate information in from BMSs and EPMSs, various systems. They need to integrate it into ticketing systems and other tools that they're using. And so as opposed to it being a suite in DCIM 2.0, which was really designed to manage one data center, that's really what those tools were designed to do. We've evolved this into meeting the needs of DCIM 3.0 and the challenges there of, much more about the hybrid environment, multiple data centers, multiple edge solutions, and how do we start managing those? So sorry for the long-winded answer, but it's a 40-year history that I think I was trying to cover there. So.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm intrigued as well, because I mean, DCIM, as I think we've talked in the past, maybe didn't always deliver. You know, the reality was slightly different from the promise. So I'm just slightly intrigued as to, what the thinking was. You liked the term sufficiently to stick with DCIM for DCIM 3.0, or were you at all tempted to come up with a different name, or do you think the industry doesn't need yet another acronym or name? DCIM does the job.
Well, it's funny. We had this debate internally about how do we talk about this new trend, and should we, call it something else? And And I really do believe, DCIM, many people say DCIM is a 4-letter word, right? We've heard people say that because of some of the challenges that some people had with the implementations. But what it really is about is data center infrastructure management. And we're also becoming very clear about what the problems are that we are going after with this EcoStruxure IT suite, right? And our portfolio. What we're really going after is there's 2 primary areas that we're looking at. Number one is the white space that you have inside of co-location providers, and what are the dashboards and things that they need to provide their customers, right? And again, we're approaching it much differently, where it's not that we're going to go in and solve their problem for them. I think that was a problem with DCIM 2.0, is those tools, including ours, was designed to be, tell you what, Mr. Customer, here's a tool that's going to solve all your problems, right? And the reality was that disappointed many people when they implemented it. The reality is DCIM 3.0 is we've revamped how we're thinking about the tools, but there's also different challenges. So first of all, DCIM was always built to help with resiliency. That's why you buy the infrastructure. Secondly, though, is cybersecurity concerns. We have data that says from 2014 to now, companies reporting cybersecurity compromises is up 40%, right? So cybersecurity is much more of an ongoing concern. And as well as what we think is an emerging question on sustainability. So anyway, it's about DCIM is helping solve the problems of the white space of these larger data centers. But I also think the CIOs are going to play a critical role in this, and I can get into more in a minute, but the CIOs managing the sprawling infrastructure, where they have some of their equipment inside of colo space, they have some in the remnants of their own data centers, and they have some that is in what were called server rooms and wiring closets. We really believe, and there's people out there, everything needs to be thought of as a data center, right? Everything out there is an attack surface on cybersecurity. Everything out there is mission critical for resiliency. And candidly, what is the energy consumption is going to be a question that we think our industry will get challenged on. So,
and it's, when you say everything will be a data center, we're at the beginning of the edge data center, if you like. Do you think that is another area? What you're doing, is that designed to address that? Because clearly we've had during the pandemic, as you say, people working remotely, but the sort of edge data center industry as a sort of collective body is still getting its act together. But if IoT and 5G do what we're told they'll do, to your point, there'll be data centers on almost every street corner, etc. So the complexity is just going to get worse, but what you're doing is going to be able to sort of address that as well.
Well, exactly. But again, I don't want to limit us when we talk about edge data center. That's another term that, there's debates over what that means, sure. Right? Yep. And people tend to get focused on edge computing. So there's a big debate you get into about where's the compute. We've got a little different view on that. We think that's a really interesting conversation, by the way. But it's right now, our models show 60% of IT energy consumption is in what you would call a data center, traditional data center. 40% of it is outside of that. Call it the edge. And all the distributed edge data centers, wiring closets, endpoints, take all those numbers. That today is about 40% of IT energy consumption in our models. Our projections believe that by 2030, it'll be 50-50. By 2040, 60% of IT energy consumption will be outside of data centers. Okay. Now, you can debate some of these models and these numbers, but what is pretty clear, there's general alignment on, is the energy consumption outside data centers is going to grow faster than data centers themselves. So what are we doing as an industry to solve that? And that is very clearly where we're trying to position EcoStruxure IT, and that's what we call DCIM 3.0 trend. Is it is not only about the data center, it is not only about resiliency, it is about the data center and all the distributed edge equipment, whatever term you want to use, and it is about the resiliency, the security, physical as well as cyber, and it's about the sustainability, the energy consumption and carbon footprint of that IT. And if 60% of our energy consumption is outside of data centers, the industry is going to have a challenge, and we view it as our obligation as Schneider to make sure that we're providing the tools to help CIOs who are managing that infrastructure to solve that challenge, and to help them with their colos who are providing some of that footprint as well. So the dynamics are much more complex, we think, with DCIM 3.0 than really what we were trying to attack in the past. So,
And bear in mind that sort of hybrid complexity, just how, I guess, how possible is it to provide as near comprehensive visibility and, I guess, some control around that as well? Because as you say, if you've got something on-prem, you've got a cloud provider, you maybe don't know, much about what they're up to. You've got some kid in a colo, and then you've maybe got some distributed, whether it's folks working from home, I don't know whether you call them, what they're doing at data center, but you've got all these endpoints, if you like. Sounds quite a tough task to understand what's going on with all of them.
Well, yes, and candidly, would I say that we've got everything in our software product to solve all of these problems today? My answer is no. Okay, which and some of my marketing people are probably ready to kick me right now. But the reality is, we know we have more work to do. Now, we've made a lot of progress. I can tell you in the last year, the investment that we've made in this DCIM business is greater than what we've probably did in the 5 years before that. Okay, number one. And it's been around trying to make sure that we have the ability, the custom solutions, and the technology to be able to deal with this highly heterogeneous environment. We go in, no two customers are the same, that they need to be able to easily deploy the tool. They have very specific requirements. I mean, we've built out a team globally and technology in order to help us do that in a much better way than in the past. So that's some very tangible progress that we've made. Okay. Now, with that being said, we actually have talked about publicly, what we think the tools need to do to get even better. So I don't believe we're perfect yet today. And we talk about things like we need to make better use of AI. We need to make it better of, really some of these tools have historically been very siloed tools, even within DCIM. We need to bring those together and make it a much more unified experience, unified data models, and that needs to be better than where we are today. We know we need a modular implementation. Not all customers want to start with everything all at once. So they have a very specific problem they want to solve. Hey, help me solve that problem, and then maybe in the future you can grow with me. And we didn't really have that flexibility. The tools historically were very rigid. And so we've adjusted our business model and our tools to be better at that, but we need to continue to improve. Interesting one, hybrid IT innovation. Some customers want it on premise. Some customers prefer a cloud solution. Some customers want to run it in a private cloud. We need as an industry to provide that flexibility and allow people to have those different implementation options. And then finally, we're, again, a big focus on how do I get a consolidated view of IT energy consumption? What is its carbon footprint? How am I managing that effectively? We don't have all of the things in place that we want there, but I can promise you we're investing in this area and we're going after helping the industry solve these challenges.
So if I've understood right, maybe at the moment you're sort of looking into the infrastructure and bringing back a lot of raw data, which humans that are then maybe turning into information, and the longer term plan is to maybe start automating that decision making as well. Is that correct, or where are you in that? Assuming that's where you want to be, where are you on that?
Yeah, well, and again, I don't think that's a black and white question necessarily, right? Because it's a continuum, and that's why I like to think in terms of, hey, we're at the early stages of what's likely a 20-year cycle. If history is any guide, right? And people could be happy to be in a bar and debate it with people, but it's if history is any guide, this tends to be how things play out. I mean, we are using AI today, and we're using algorithms today to help make our customers' life easier. I mean, we have predictive battery wear models so that we're much better at predicting when batteries will fail in UPSs, for instance. We're exploring being able to use similar technology, say, with fan failures in cooling. Now, we don't have that done yet, but that's an example of something that we're working on. So what I think you're going to see is AI has the potential of alarms and sifting through alarms and making them more meaningful. Those are areas that we need to go and explore. But it's not going to be like one day all of a sudden you have it. What's going to happen is we're going to slowly keep rolling out and keep getting better at this. And the promise is that someday, you'll be the human and the machine will tell you exactly what's happening. I wouldn't want to sell us as that we've got that solved yet today, but that certainly, when you look at data lakes, cloud technologies, the amount of data that we can store now, I mean, there clearly is a road forward to get there, and using algorithms and AI to augment what people already do. So.
And I'm curious. I mean, one of my, dare I say, pet hobbies is AI ops, which you may be familiar with as a term. I've sort of watched that, and it's developed into I think observability is now the term that sort of covers that and other things. I'm just intrigued. Do you see what you're doing as being a sort of one of the essential tools within an overall observability platform eventually, or do you think what you're doing will in itself, become a major platform? I'm just interested how you see that whole sort of, gaining information from infrastructure and then, making decisions around it.
Well, it's interesting when you think about AI ops and kind of the overall monitoring that needs to happen inside of IT. I mean, for instance, there's tools out there that are monitoring CPU performance and CPU utilization and, network bandwidth and so forth. What our experience is when you look at these tools, I think there tends to be an impression that AI is like some kind of magic, that it just, you throw an AI engine in and then all of a sudden magical things come out. And it doesn't really work that way. I was at a conference with an expert in AI and they said, we really shouldn't think of it as artificial intelligence. We should think of it as augmented intelligence, because what it's really doing is augmenting what humans already know. But it's being able to let you scale it and take expertise and apply it in a much broader way. So, what we view within DCIM and our role right now is we understand, and Schneider is an expert in understanding what's happening at the physical infrastructure. We're able to make the connections back. When I say physical, I'm talking about like the white spaces, the stuff directly connected to IT. We can make the connection points back into the facility infrastructure, and there's impacts and things that happen between that. And we need to go and apply AI against that. Right. And against that knowledge. We have experts. I mean, the way we developed our battery wear model, for instance, Phil, was we took guys who knew a lot about how batteries behave, went with them, created algorithms based off of what they knew, and then just started automating that, making that better. But we had to start with that expertise that somebody knows. So, now in the long term, how does this all work with observability platforms and how do we integrate? I don't know, but it starts with, look, we got to take our expertise and we got to automate it better. We got to augment it with AI, right? And think of augmented intelligence instead of artificial. And then we are committed to being much more open with APIs and data sharing than maybe people would feel that we were in the past. But it's because of this need to make sure that there's full visibility, right? And then we recognize we're not going to be the only tool out there. We need to be able to provide data. We need to be able to ingest data that might not be coming to and from our system. And that's a big shift that we've made in the last year or two within the group, is understanding that's the environment and that's the direction the industry is heading.
Okay, and I mean, we've talked a lot about the sort of technology itself. It'd be good to understand. I mean, you will have a customer base that are doing lots of clever things. Are you able to share, whether you can name names or not, just what some of your customers are doing with EcoStruxure and how it is helping them, understand their whether it's data center infrastructure and wider IT environment?
Well, sure. I mean, we've got examples, like we've talked about Eco Data Center as a reference, where I mean, they've implemented our tool as a co-location provider because they need to be able to provide energy consumption and carbon footprint reports to their customers. And we have numerous co-location providers who are asking us for that now, and that's happening today. That's not like a theory. That's actually occurring. So, and particularly in Europe, that is a very strong drumbeat coming, and in many ways, Europe is leading the charge in the world on where we need to go with sustainability. I think what we're starting to see is, if you think about now the CIO side of the house, because that's really the two that I see. I see, co-location providers and trying to enable the white space. They are feeling the pressure. We have one example of an end user went into his colo and said, I want you to deliver me these reports. And that forced the colo to come to us to help solve that requirement, right? So, and it was a lot around energy consumption. I want to be able to get visibility. I want to get transparency into what you're doing, Mr. Colo, right? So that's driving. So there's this discussion about transparency and how you're operating that end customers in a multi-tenant colo are starting to ask, that's driving the colo business. It's quite interesting, I think. And on the CIO side of the house, to give you some data points, we're actually actively working with our own CIO team because they want to get control over the 800,000 server rooms, wiring closets they have within Schneider. And they're using our tools now to say, what is the energy consumption? And then we're connecting it in with Energy Resource Advisor, which is a sustainability platform of Schneider's, to give them very granular level of carbon footprint reports. So in that rack, in the server room, what's the carbon footprint of the IT in that space? So that's something we're actively working on with our own teams. And it seems that the sustainability question is starting to hit the CIOs, because I recently was speaking with some industry analysts, and they said, there's one guy who a year ago I talked to him and he said, look, in the United States, I think you guys are full of it. Nobody's talking about sustainability, right? And then I just saw him recently, and he goes, I have to tell you, in the last 6 months, I got more calls about CIOs asking about what they need to do with sustainability than I've ever seen, you know? So I think, you know, there's these types of questions and challenges are starting to come to the forefront. So hopefully that answers your question. That's
yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, before we finish, sustainability, I know we could have a completely separate long conversation about that.
Oh yeah.
But with what's going on, you know, in energy prices, supply chain, all this, I mean, do you think the data center industry, I mean, I'd like to think I know what's going on in the industry, but I haven't seen, you know, large price hikes yet, because I know the colos and etc. buy their, you know, energy quite a long way in advance. I mean, do you think at some stage the industry is going to sort of have a bit of a rude awakening, or because of the way they purchase power and other things they are doing, will they be able to, you know, keep everybody, well, keep prices under control, or what do we need to watch out?
Well, you know, it's first of all, if I was an expert in energy prices, I'd be, you know, trading them on the trading markets. But but here's my gut feeling that is, I think it's going to be very unique, very specific, customer by customer, or provider by provider. That it's not going to be a wholesale change. I mean, if you look at some of the internet giants and what they do, I mean, they're actually going in, they're putting in offsetting, you know, renewables for the footprint that they're putting in. They'll be in one situation. You'll have other colos who maybe they've hedged, maybe they've bought their energy in forward pricing, then they'll be protected. There'll be other ones who aren't, right? You know, so I think my guess is you'll see a mix, right, depending on what happens, unless we get a severe shock, in which case, you know, all bets are off the table potentially. What I do think is going to emerge, though, and again, go to the 50% of the problem shortly, that's going to be outside of what we call data centers today. What are we doing about that energy? And you know, in Europe, I think the regulators are likely to start looking at that, and that is the area that we have no understanding of, you know. And so, you know, what are you really paying for your IT? Well, most CIOs don't pay the energy bill, right? So they don't even know if prices went up, what's the impact on them? They don't even feel that. That's the area where I think that the current status quo is going to need to change, you know. And CIOs, again, I ask a very simple question of somebody I met recently. I said, when do you expect you're going to get asked the question, what is the energy consumption you have of IT? What is your carbon footprint? And what are you doing to manage it and possibly reduce it? And today, none of them can answer that question. And that question is coming, we think. And so that's part of what we're also trying to help with, and help give the visibility and the tools necessary to answer that question. So.
Yeah, and to that point, just maybe finally, do you think it is possible to resolve the apparent conflict of, you know, digital expansion that seems to have no, you know, end in sight, and sustainable or even a net zero? It just seems to me, on the face of it, the two things are almost completely contradictory. So it's going to be a challenge to, you know, to have a completely net zero data center that's also providing vast amounts of digital services to consumers.
Well, you know, look, there's we could have a long discussion on this one, but quickly, it's like, first of all, you've got to look at our industry holistically, I think, in terms of, yes, people are going digital, and we have some data points that we've quoted. It's like, if you look at Facebook and YouTube right now, I think there's 4 billion users. If you go back 10 years ago, it was only 400 million. So in 10 years, it's gone up by 10x. This industry has a habit of that type of growth. Now, what's going to be the next 10x in growth of compute power, let's call it that? Who knows? Maybe it's the metaverse, maybe it's driverless cars, but something's going to come and drive that type of growth. What we've been tremendously effective at, actually, and the industry should be proud, is that the energy consumption and the carbon footprint has not gone up by a factor of 10, between IT getting much more powerful and better, and us getting much better at building physical infrastructure that's efficient. And on top of that, the leadership of some of the providers to buy renewables. We are actually, I think, done a very good job of an industry. I mean, just take the waste of a physical infrastructure, PUEs. I mean, we've eliminated about 80–90% of the losses compared to 15 years ago. There's not many industries that have done that. So we should be quite proud about it, number one, is my point. Second point I would make is, people underestimate what is the carbon footprint and what IT enables. And they forget that in many ways, like if I can take a building management system and automate a building, I mean, there's plenty of quotes out there that says it can get 15 to 20% better. We have RIB software inside of Schneider where, they go and say, if you implement our software during the construction phase, we can eliminate 30% of waste, right? 30% of rework. Well, all of that rework has energy and carbon footprint associated with it. So we tend to forget that. We didn't publish this, but we did some fun math internally. And we said, there's how many Netflix movies would I have to watch, and what's the carbon footprint compared to going to a movie theater and watching it, right? We didn't publish this, but we kind of modeled out, like if you're in the US, I have to drive 5 miles, go to the movie theater, watch the theater, that has to be heat and cooled, and then I got to drive home. What's that equivalent to? And we came to a number of like 750 Netflix movies that you could watch. So, it is a super complex, like, our industry is actually enabling a cleaner world, right? We really are. But that doesn't mean we can sit back and just like let the energy consumption grow from 2 times the grid, that's 20% of the grid. Like we're going to do better than that. And so anyway, I know I danced around there in a few different topics, but it's it's a complex question that you're wading into. Is I mean, even look at us. We're doing this video interview. Maybe did that save us a flight? So I didn't have to fly to meet you because we can do it this way. Well, if so, then this is like the most, much more carbon friendly than the alternative. And so anyway, it's a great debate and a great discussion to have.
That's fine. And I mean, is sustainability, is that the number one topic you think in the data center industry, or is there anything else that we need to be aware of?
Well, no, to say it's number one, again, I would say, again, our challenge as an industry, and again, I'm going to do the whole hybrid environment, right? If you go with our view that everything's a data center now, everything needs to be thought of like a data center. There's really 3 motions happening. First of all, is resiliency hasn't gone away, right? So again, what about the resiliency of the smallest wiring closet, the server room, the edge data center, the regional data center, the core, whatever terms you want to use, it's everything along that way you have to make sure is resilient, number one. Number 2, there's a challenge with security, and we could have talked more about that. But on cyber, all of that is part of your attack surface, right? And if you think about what's happening in industrial process control systems, those are coming onto the standard IT network. So that now is coming into the IT, CIO perimeter as well. What are we doing to maintain those in terms of their cybersecurity? So we've got a lot of tools that we're developing and have developed to help with that. Like, how do I manage my attack surface in an effective way? So resiliency, security, and by the way, security also includes physical security. If I have remote sites and I have nobody there, how do I have the cameras, the eyes, the ears to be able to see what's going on when somebody goes in? That's an area that we're focused on as well. So resiliency, security, both cyber and physical, and sustainability, which I would argue is more emerging. That it's something that, yes, the big data center guys have been dealing with this issue up till now. They're still working on scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. How do they report all of that? But just think about the 50% of the problem that's not in that area. We have the same discussion that needs to occur. And that is still emerging, I think. I don't think that's a day-to-day topic yet that people are discussing, but we think it will be. So.
Okay, well, I have kept you as busy as ever, and it's always a joy to chat to you. So, Kevin, thank you very much indeed for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Good to see you again.